Raygun is coming to Madison. Raygun is a Midwest-based unionized design and print shop with retail locations in cities across our region, and now Madison. They're opening on State Street this September at the former Paul's Bookstore location. Raygun is proud to support public media, public schools, public lands, and public restrooms. Shop and sign up for their newsletter at raygunsite.com and follow at Raygun Shirts everywhere for new product releases, plus grand opening information for their new location at 670 State Street in Madison. You're invited to Bike the Barns, a one-of-a-kind food and farming adventure taking place on Sunday, September 21st in the Madison area. Hosted by Fair Share CSA Coalition, this fundraising bike ride supports local farmers and fresh food access. With fresh farm foods and drinks, live tunes, and farm tours at each stop, plus all skill levels are welcome because it's a ride, not a race. Spots fill up quickly, so register today at csacoalition.org and pedal together for fresh food for everyone. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about.
Hey y'all, it's executive producer Haley Sperling here. Before we get into today's show, I want to take a moment to tell you all about CityCast Madison Neighbors. It's the absolute best way to support the work that we do here at CityCast Madison and Madison Minutes. Every weekday, we bring you stories about our city that matter. Stories that entertain, fascinate, and even sometimes enrage us. We do it because we love this city and we want to be a resource that creates meaningful connections within it. If you appreciate what we do and want to be a part of creating a more informed and connected Madison, consider joining our Neighbors program. It's $10 a month or $100 a year and helps ensure that we get to keep telling these stories for a long time to come. Go to membership.citycast.fm to learn more. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. All right, now let's get to today's show. Today, we are digging into a complex human resources story with a lot of names and city departments to break down, but I promise we are going to get through it together. I am executive producer Haley Sperling here, sitting in for Bianca Martin, and with me today is Angiana Nardine, local government reporter for the Cap Times. Angiana, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Haley. Happy to talk about the reporting.
Yes, you are the reporter on this beat. You have been breaking news and covering stories, getting those record requests in left and right. So I know we are in good hands with you leading us along the way. Before we get into all of those specific records and names and departments, I want to talk about the city departments and organizations that are at the heart of this story. So we're talking about the Department of Civil Rights, which oversees several other city departments, including the Equal Opportunities Division. Can you just go ahead and break it down and explain how all these departments are connected and what their responsibilities in our city government are?
Yeah, happy to answer this question. I learned a lot through this process, and I'm sure anybody listening would be really interested to hear more about what our civil rights staff do in the city. So the Department of Civil Rights, as you mentioned, is kind of made up of a bunch of different sub-agencies, I guess is how I would describe them. They work kind of together, not necessarily on behalf of one another, but they do work in collaboration. So the Affirmative Action Division is tasked with enforcing hiring goals within the city government and city contractors, and they also are responsible for ensuring that other private companies or entities are in compliance with those. They don't call them quotas, but they just really look to see how are different agencies and different organizations working with their diverse employees, making sure they're not tokenizing them, making sure that any goals or metrics that they do want to meet are in compliance with what city, state, federal things might involve. And then there's also the Equal Opportunities Division, which does work on behalf of the commission, and they investigate housing, employment, and all other kind of complaints related to the more protected classes. So race, sex, gender, class, disability status, that sort of thing. And then there's the Equity and Social Justice Division, which does a little bit more interpersonal connection with neighborhoods and communities. They also work with other community partners to get more at the specific things happening in the communities regarding disability rights, language access, that sort of thing. So if you ride the Madison Metro bus and you see a number on there telling you to call for interpretation services, for example, that might lead you directly to some of the city services that they offer. They have an administrative division and that does a lot of the paperwork for the commission meetings and all of the other intermediary things that they do. But the three main functions of it are equity, social justice, affirmative action, and equal opportunities.
Okay, so these are the folks in the city who are making sure that Madison is not only talking the talk when it comes to accessibility and diversity, but also walking the walk, right? Taking these actions and making sure people have the accommodations that they need in order to thrive in our city.
Exactly. They're kind of the unsung heroes of all of the concerns that impact residents, regardless of your identity and what happens. If you have a concern and you want to bring it to the city's attention, these are the people that are going to look at the issues, look at the documentations. They may request interviews with people or request documentation and really investigate and look at what can they do to either affirm or, get more information and understand what's happening. Internally, however, it's a totally different situation. That's when you bring in the human resources department, you bring in external investigators, labor law firms, that sort of thing. So when it comes to internal things get a little more complicated.
Sure. And so this is good context to set because we're about to dive into that whole mess of internal organizational practices. You first reported back in May of this year when the Department of Civil Rights Director Norman Davis was put under investigation for allegedly violating city and federal employment laws. Let's start there. What are the complaints that have been lodged against him?
The city has received 2 formal complaints against the director, Norman Davis. One of them is this joint complaint that was filed last November on behalf of a dozen or so employees. And the president of the Madison Professional Supervisories Employees Association, Dan Rolfe, submitted this complaint, but specifically re-upping some of the concerns that have been shared. As mandatory reporters, the MIPC organization is kind of a union-like organization that represents city employees, city public workers in that sector.
What does that stand for, MIPC?
Madison Professional Supervisories Employee Association.
Okay, that's a new acronym I haven't heard before.
The amount of acronyms I've learned, policy things I've understood through this reporting process is crazy. So, so it's a union-like organization that represents city workers. And so if there does need to be some mediation, they'll come in on behalf of the employee's request or on behalf of a supervisor's request and kind of be there to make sure that the employee's concerns are listened to and validated. And so during some of these concerns, different conversations and things that have happened years ago were kind of considered to create this joint complaint, laying out the lay of the land, alleging that over the years, Norman Davis violated city and federal employment laws related to disability rights, specifically involving employees with disabilities and women who work in the department. And so lots of different specific examples kind of laid out among the employees. But then the second complaint that the city received was actually in May this year. Eventually ended up getting some of the documents related to the complaint through records request. But because that investigation is still ongoing, I have not received the specific complaints. But some of the things mentioned in that joint complaint include just a lack of transparency about the work process. And that includes workload expectations, communicating what that looks like for each independent employee, because each employee reports to their own division manager. There's also affirmative action division manager, Tracy Lomax, who underwent an external investigation process, kind of, sort of, in relation to this big joint complaint. There was also a separate complaint that was filed, I want to say around the same time as this first complaint came out to the public. And in that complaint, the employee also alleged that Lomax discriminated and retaliated against her because of a hearing disability. So there's a lot kind of wrapped up into these things, but specifically within this joint complaint, a lot of the employees are alleging that Davis's leadership as the director, as the person responsible for the other division managers, was just really toxic. They described the work environment as toxic. People mentioned things about misogynistic comments being thrown at women, specifically tone policing them and, talking about the way that they are educationally expressing themselves. Employees also had a lot to say about the telecommuting policy and how some of them were asked to work in the office, which would be impactful for their different medical conditions or the different requirements that they have for their accommodations, whereas Davis was allowed to telecommute every day. Again, this is all allegedly, this is all mentioned in the complaint, but it's kind of drawing different branches and saying these are some examples of how Davis is disrespecting or discriminating against some people for their disabilities or because they are women. And some of those other things include intimidating workers by writing them up for insubordination when they raise concerns with other human resources officials, including some of the professional representation folks that we have over at MIPSI, and then also retaliating workers by placing them on administrative leave when they don't comply with what directives Davis has given them.
Hey, animal lovers! Your favorite team needs you to cheer them on at Bark and Wine Tailgate on Saturday, September 27th at Dane County Humane Society. From 3 to 6 p.m., join in the tailgate spirit with delicious food, refreshing drinks, tail-wagging games, a silent auction, and plenty of furry fun for a great cause. Plus, you'll get to meet some amazing animal greeters who will make the day unforgettable. Want more? Grab VIP pregame tickets to enjoy early access and other special perks. Can't wait for the event? The Donate to Vote Showdown is on. Every dollar you donate to cheer for your favorite animal team, cat, dog, wildlife, or critter, counts as one vote to crown this year's champion. Plus, your donation supports animals in our community. Last year, Team Cat clawed their way to the top, but who will win this tailgate rematch? That's up to you. Get your tickets today and start casting your votes now at giveshelter.org/BW. Remember that amazing little cafe you discovered last summer with the perfect latte and crazy view? Or that sweet hiking spot your friend told you about but you can't remember the name? With Overlook Maps, special places never get lost again. Create personal lists of places you've been and want to go. Build your must-visit list for your next vacation, your foodie favorites for date nights, or your weekend getaways when you need to escape. Share your favorite hidden gems with friends and family. Let them discover that incredible barbecue joint you found, or that scenic overlook that takes your breath away. Or keep your secret spots completely private. Planning a trip with friends? Create a shared list where everyone can add their ideas. Visiting a new city? Check out lists from locals who know the real gems, not just the tourist traps. And here's the best part. No ads cluttering your lists. No one selling your data to advertisers. Just your personal collection of amazing places organized exactly how you want them. Overlook Maps, collect, organize, and share the places that matter to you. Download free at overlookmaps.com and check out overlookmaps.com/Madison to see some of our lists and great spots on a map and in your pocket. Your places, your way.
So there are a lot of facets of this investigation. There are a lot of different complaints, it sounds like, and then also the multiple departments that are involved. So just to set the scene too, you said the Department of Civil Rights, Norman Davis is the director, and they oversee the Affirmative Action Division, where the division manager is Tracy Lomax. They also oversee the Equity and Social Justice Department. Their division manager is Christy Kumar, and then also the Equal Opportunities, whose division manager was Byron Bishop, and we will get into that next. But who exactly is investigating the validity of these complaints? Is it an outside agency? Is it someone else within the city?
Yeah, so Human Resources Director Erin Hilson told me via email that each investigation, each complaint is really taken on a case-by-case basis. In the instance of the Civil Rights Department, you have a director with a lot of complaints kind of wrapped up into one major complaint. The city also confirmed that there are no sustained complaints against Davis. And so kind of during this process, I believe when the city was receiving this joint complaint and figuring out what it would look like to get either an external law firm or navigate if someone internally the city is going to investigate. And I mean, just giving a side note, when we had previous situations where other staff have gone on leave or were placed in other positions, you have other city leaders like Park Superintendent Eric Knepp stepping in for Metro, for example. So there are other instances where the city will kind of move pieces around as necessary. But in this particular instance, the city opted to hire an external law firm to investigate these claims. And they kind of mentioned it. It's a 3-month process, should cost no more than $30,000. But the city has now employed 2 separate law firms to investigate 3 separate claims about 2 different Department of Civil Rights leaders within the past year. One of them against Lomax was not sustained. She returned to work this summer, but the one against Davis is still ongoing and should be concluding at some point soon.
And how long has Davis been in this job? Like, are the complaints against him new? Have there been any sort of investigations into him in the past?
Yeah, Davis has been leader of the Department of Civil Rights since 2016. He previously worked in the Affirmative Action Division before it became the one big conglomerate Department of Civil Rights that it is.
I see. And is there any history of complaints against him from that time, or is this stuff just kind of come out now?
Yeah, according to city officials, there are no sustained complaints. And my understanding of the process is if a complaint is given to the city and the city either hires an external investigator or has internal folks look into the matter, if it's not sustained, it's not really recorded. So if there were to pull a bunch of records and asking for complaints that people put in previously, they might not necessarily show up in the record simply because of the process that I think the city operates under. But in terms of the joint complaint, I mean, some of these complaints are going back as early as 2017, 2018, 2019.
Yeah, so it sounds like there is a history here, and now there are just more complaints that are coming to light. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the more recent development in this story, which is that the Equal Opportunities Division Manager, Byron Bishop, had recently exited his role in kind of an interesting way. What can you tell us about this departure, and what is the news that's coming out of there now?
In early August, one of my sources shared with me an email that was sent by Deputy Mayor Linda Vacunta, who was placed in charge of employment-making decisions amid the ongoing investigation into Davis to ensure that there's no retaliation that takes place. And that email said that Bishop would no longer be working with the city's Department of Civil Rights and that Adriana Peguero, one of the city's assistant attorneys, would be stepping in as interim. What we know about this is that there was an investigation into whether Bishop violated not the city's harassment and discrimination administrative policy, but rather other policies related to performance expectations or properly noticing open meetings law. And I thought this was really interesting because one of the particular meetings that they were referencing was the open but not really open public listening session about workplace discrimination that took place in June. Really interesting stuff. I remember learning about the public meeting after it happened and reaching out to folks who were there, but it being really complicated because it was announced to people as anonymous. Folks were there under the condition of anonymity, which made it a little bit hard to report. Honestly, I did a lot of digging, did a lot of calls and stuff like that. But it was really interesting because a lot of the people that reported to me, that told me about their experiences, just mentioned that meeting in particular was meant to be the first in quarterly sessions about just giving people resources about workplace discrimination, how to navigate it, what to do about it.
Yeah, and I had read part of that letter that Deputy Mayor Linda Vacunta had sent to Bishop, and in part of it, she said, quote, "Byron, it is due to your actions, your conduct, your behavior, and an utter rupture of the bonds of trust that are needed in the employment relationship that I have no other option at this point but to take this step, since past discipline has failed to correct the behavior. Out of respect for your years of service, the city would consider a resignation agreement." So that is some pretty heavy language. And I know that also following Bishop's departure, at least 2 other city officials resigned from the Equal Opportunities Commission. Can you tell us more about that? Are there more dominoes that are expected to fall? What is going on here?
When I first was making calls reporting on the story in May, I had sources tell me that stuff was about to go down, and I really didn't know what that meant. And then as things kept going on this summer, it became clear to me that there were some dominoes that were probably going to fall, one domino after the other. But I think what's really interesting about that termination letter that Byron Bishop received is that it's technically null and void because he opted to resign and retire. And so this is a newer development that we got with records requests as well. But on the same day that Deputy Mayor Linda Vacunta submitted that email to civil rights staff, the termination letter was sent out. And so that kind of was a stronghold kind of happening at the same time. But it is strong language, and it is really confusing and concerning when you have staff members who don't know what's going on. You have leaders who don't know what's going on. You have so many leaders under investigation. You have city budget stuff going on at the same time. There's just so much happening at the same time, and it's happening kind of sort of behind closed doors and in documents that regular residents don't necessarily get access to.
I want to take a step back and talk about the departments that these two men have led. Davis, as we've mentioned, is the director of the city's Department of Civil Rights, and Byron Bishop was the city's Equal Opportunities Division manager. And it just feels like there is a lot of really terrible irony here in the fact that leaders of the city's Department of Civil Rights are facing these kinds of allegations. Like, what does this say about the culture that's going on in this department at the city level?
Yeah. I mean, immediately following the news breaking that Byron Bishop was no longer going to be the leader of the Division of Equal Opportunities, you had two commissioners resign. You had the commission president, Brian Benford, who formerly was a city council alder. And then you had another community member, Catriel Tan, submit her resignation immediately after. And so one of the things that stood out to me, Benford had really, really strong words. And Benford was one of those sources that during the reporting process, I was able to talk with very candidly just about the history of Madison's attention to issues of race, its issues of civil rights. And it doesn't always have to be a proclamation or a resolution and something fancy and dramatic, but sometimes even just holding space for conflict resolution, having a place where power hierarchies within the cities doesn't exist, and that people feel safe and comfortable bringing concerns to their superior. And I think that's kind of what's at the root of this conflict in the Department of Civil Rights. Going back even further before the Civil Rights Department was even founded, I mean, there were concerns about leaders who were being inappropriate with staff members. And, a lot of that happened in court, in, civil court. But the city has a history of not really taking these complaints seriously, according to sources. And I think that's what most is important about the culture of the department, is that how are you supposed to give your time and attention investigating claims of discrimination, harassment, retaliation, simply because you are the person that you are in the circumstance that you're in, and you're facing the same exact problem internally and you don't have anywhere to turn to, and feeling as though the Human Resources Department, the city's administrative procedure memoranda, whoever, there's no remedy, there's no help. And so I was at least grateful during this process to learn about people's experiences and hopefully give people a sense of this is what the city's processes are. I think one thing that Brian Benford mentioned was that he has seen no leadership from city council members, from the mayor's office, from any real administrative leaders addressing some of these concerns. And I think we have a lot of spaces where we create public listening sessions and we want to have an open dialogue. And then you have a leader get suspended, get terminated, resigned. You have a leader under fire for supposedly being in support of a safe space to talk about your workplace discrimination experience. So there is a lot of unfortunate irony. And I think Madison should do a better job, city leaders should do a better job of making sure that they're really giving attention to the issues as people bring them up, and not, falling on the bureaucratic processes and saying that communication has to be better. And it's really interesting because one of the footnotes at the end of the investigation into Lomax was to get better communication and have, better problem solving in the Department of Civil Rights. And I feel like that is one step that needs to be taken, but let's keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other, but without a complex understanding of the power dynamics that are at play, regardless of male, female, race, class, gender, disability. We need to just treat each other better as human beings. And I think regardless of your workplace environment, that's something that we all can carry moving forward. And hopefully city leaders can employ some of those philosophies in the work that they do.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself, right? You mentioned these listening sessions. I know the city hosted listening sessions this year to address workplace discriminations. Have we had any learnings from those? Like, what is the status of that moving forward?
The first session was in June. I think some commissioners told me that they were planning the next one for sometime in September, so next month, somewhere in South Madison. And one takeaway that I keep hearing is document everything, make sure that you're advocating for yourself and for others. And that doesn't have to be, calling people out or being rude. I think accountability does not have to be nasty. Accountability simply just means putting it on the table so that we can address what the problem is and let people speak their piece and talk about what remedy means for them. But I think a major takeaway from the listening sessions is really to create frameworks and practices that allow for people to be heard and be taken care of and feel as though their leaders are also being held accountable and that it's not authoritarian.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a lot of really great reasons as to why everyday Madisonians should care about this story and why we should be paying attention to this story. Because, like you said, we are all bringing different parts of ourselves to the workplace. And it's still important that we recognize and see each other as humans at the end of the day and are able to move through, these spaces with grace and compassion. I know this story has had a really long tail. Like I said, this news broke in May. You wrote a cover story about it in July, and we are still talking about it here in August. Bring us up to today. Where does the investigation into Davis stand right now?
On August 7th, I was told that the investigation into Davis would be wrapped up within a matter of weeks. And I actually got the findings into the internal investigation into Bishop before that. So I imagine that the Davis investigation will be wrapped up soon.
What are the city's next steps then here as we wrap up this investigation?
One thing that I learned that the city did a few years ago, I think maybe pre-COVID-19 pandemic, was a culture study. So I'm actually going to look into the findings of that culture study to see, did they have any implementation practices for them? But moving forward, I know the city will be eager to read the investigation findings into Davis. I imagine some form of restorative justice should take place between any of the employees who had anything to say about Lomax, working with Lomax. And hopefully the city can heal. Hopefully the people who work in the Department of Civil Rights can heal and continue to do the work that they want to do and feel as if they're supported professionally by the city.
And Anjiana, before we let you go, I just want to say, you have been doing so much reporting on this. You are really, like I said at the top, you are the reporter on the scene for this story. You're still working on follow-ups. What do you hope that people, be it at the city level or just everyday Madisonians, can gain from your reporting on this situation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My mom and I had this running joke because I was born on MLK Day, and she was like, I always knew you were going to grow up and be my civil rights baby. And doing the reporting on this story, I thought that was a beautiful full circle moment. But really, in today's political environment, in today's climate, really take care of yourself and really begin to ask yourself, what does it mean for you to get justice? What does it mean for you to feel secure in yourself? What does it mean for you to be taken care of? Be willing to change and be malleable and also work with other people. I think most of the issues that I read about in some of these complaints boil down to being understanding. They boil down to listening, and they boil down to giving each other grace and understanding that what works for you might not work for another person. And so hopefully readers can take away the humanity of it all. We are all as great as we want to be. And if you make a decision to be better, then I promise you, you will be able to make better happen. So hopefully readers can take that away from the reporting on civil rights, but also just in addressing any other future problems with government. Keep advocating, keep going forward, and keep pursuing the truth and keep pursuing justice for all.
Anjiana, that is such a great note for us to end on. Thank you so much for your time today and for your amazing reporting on all of this.
Thank you so much, Haley. Thank you for listening, y'all.
That's Anjiana Nardine, local government reporter at the Cap Times. We've linked to her reporting on this matter in our show notes, so definitely go check it out and give it a read if you haven't yet. And that's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm executive producer Haley Sperling in for Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with someone who cares about equal rights protections? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until next time, take good care.